Corla. Ceann Corla, as other speakers have said, when we are having a debate in relation to carbon taxation and climate change, we are in effect debating the future of humanity on our planet. We are debating the future not only of communities but of different of peoples all over our world, and indeed in some parts of our world the future of their civilization. That is what is at stake when we are debating climate change and the future of our environment and our biodiversity. And when confronting a challenge of that scale, I think the best place is to start with the science and to start with the opinions of scientists on this topic who have considered what are the most effective steps that can be taken to help mitigate this catastrophe, to help lessen the chaos, and to help ensure that the generations to come have some chance of the standard of living that this and previous generations, that most of us have been able to access. So what do the scientists say? Well, the advice is clear from the majority of them who've considered this topic. Our own Climate Change Advisory Council, extraordinarily not mentioned once by the opposition in this entire debate. What's their view on the topic? It's as follows. Carbon tax is a key component of transition to a low-carbon, climate-resilient and environmentally sustainable economy. A very wide range of research in Ireland and elsewhere has shown that raising the cost of emitting greenhouse gases is essential if we are to halt global warming. That's the view of the Climate Change Advisory Council. I heard a number of speakers, particularly in Sinn Féin, quote the ESRI, quote a paper from the ESRI. So let's look at other papers from the ESRI. What have they said? A paper from them in February of this year said, in the coming years, major reductions in carbon emissions are going to be required to meet Irish and European objectives on climate action. A key part of this strategy will be the use of carbon taxes. So that's the oft-quoted ESRI this evening on the core issue that we are confronting. Now, what I did hear quoted this evening from Deputy O'Brien was the University of Toronto, who made reference to a meta paper. Well, when he makes reference to a meta paper, I'm not quite sure what kind of analysis he is referring to, but I did go and research it, and maybe he's referring to the paper by Jessica Green in 2020 from the University of Toronto that did indeed raise issues and question the role of carbon taxation and the role it can play in helping us evolve a collapse of our environment. He didn't, however, make any reference to Roger Martin and his paper, who said that his review profiles a growing body of academic research and good evidence to show that careful carbon pricing policy may be a tool to help Canada prosper in the long term. Roger Martin is the Dean of the School of Management at the University of Toronto. Deputy O'Brien certainly didn't quote either Danny Harvey, who said carbon taxes work by encouraging people to change their habits. Deputy Professor Harvey is Professor of Geography, also at the University of Toronto. And then he didn't, I'm sure, consider the papers by Tracy Snowden and Trevor Tombe, who said, and I'm quoting again, carbon taxes are not only an efficient tool to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, but they're also an increasingly important source of government revenue, also from the University of Toronto. So the only university heralded by Sinn Féin here this evening to advance their cause in relation to carbon taxing, their view of which I'm still not clear on, which I'll come on to in a moment. Yes, they did have a paper from one of their members of staff in relation to carbon taxation, many other papers from the same university making the case or acknowledging the role of carbon taxation and carbon pricing. Many other papers making that case. But that is not to say for a moment that myself, this government, don't fully appreciate or don't fully recognise the impact that rising prices, that the rising cost of energy are having on many in our country and many in our society at the moment. Too many, just as we emerge from the darkness of a pandemic, as they were looking forward to and hoping for better, different, brighter days, to be then confronted by the challenge of their standard of living going down as the price of many things are going up. The government absolutely recognises that. And we recognise that, and we have acted on it in the measures that we have brought forward on Budget Day, on our measures there of last week, which mean, for example, if you're a single person living alone and your only income is from the state, such a person is between €600 and €800 of more payments from the state this year versus last year. So that's €600 to €800 of additional support from the state. I'm not going to say for a moment that that amount better off, because I fully appreciate the challenge that so many are facing. But it is additional support because it's needed and because this government recognises it has to be quickly delivered. If you're somebody who is on the average rate of income tax here in Ireland, with the changes that we have made, the standard rate of income tax, with the different changes that we've made in personal tax credits, on the amount of income that you can pay the lower rate of income tax on, combined with the changes again there of a few weeks ago, that person will receive, after they've paid their taxes, an additional €400 to €600 per year. In recognition of the challenge that is developing, in recognition of the impact that the rising costs and changes of inflation are having on living standards. We understand it, we get it, we've acted, we have done and brought forward measures to make a difference. But a standard approach from the opposition, a standard approach from Sinn Féin, is to claim that we don't get it, that we don't understand, that we can't appreciate the lived reality, that we can't appreciate the difficulty that many are facing. This government does, but just as I would never claim I have a monopoly on wisdom on any topic, as I say again and again, nobody in this House should claim they have a monopoly on compassion. Nobody should make that claim, because we recognise the challenges that many are facing, but we also have constraints. We also have, as we indicated earlier on today, national debt now of approaching €250 billion. We have constraints in other things this House wants us to make progress on, other areas in which we need to spend the country's money on. But we've heard again the claim here that you can recognise the challenge of climate change and also be against carbon taxing. Well, maybe, just maybe you can, but you don't have many scientists or economists that support that claim. But I always recognise the autonomy or independence of anybody in this House to form a view not in keeping with the mainstream view in any particular topic. That is the essence of democracy. But you can't say that you are in favour of mitigating the effects of climate change, of avoiding a climate collapse, and pretend that there are no difficult choices. You can't argue that in advance of the change that is happening in our environment, in the week in which we've seen multiple storms batter our country, with another one to come, not to recognise that extreme change is already happening. And what the government is doing in standing by the changes that we are making in a number of weeks' time is asking for the country to see that in conjunction with all of the measures that we have taken to protect those who need help the most, and with the fact that the funding, the additional funding that is being used through raised carbon taxation, that additional funding is being used to fund retrofitting, to fund changes in social welfare payments, to fund changes in transport, to fund more sustainable ways of living within our communities. That's what this money is being used for. And the very Sinn Féin, who on the day the Climate Action Plan was published came out, you attacked it for being vague, not having ambition, lacking in detail. It's the same Sinn Féin then that attacks any way the government can of funding it. You attack it for being ambitious, unambitious, you're against any way of funding it. You're creating the sense, creating the myth that it is possible to make progress on this civilisational challenge without there being difficult choices. We appreciate, we understand that the act of putting up these carbon taxes is difficult for many. But that is why the government has put in place measures to help, and that is why we are using the revenue from the additional levels of carbon taxation to do all we can to help our society to either mitigate this change that is coming or get ready to deal with the consequences of it. And it's for that reason we do not accept the Sinn Féin motion.